Imagine spending 2 whole years at the Delhi School of Economics or, any really rigorous master's program. You survive the grind, you can derive complex theorems in your sleep, and you step into the RBI DPR Phase 1 exam feeling completely invincible.
Oh, yeah. And then you get your score back, and you miss the cutoff by 2 marks.
Right. And it's not because you didn't know the macro theory, but because you fell for a beautifully disguised multiple-choice trap.
It happens every single year. I mean, the examiners for DPR Phase 1, they know exactly how you've been trained. They know you understand the broad strokes. So they don't test the rule, right? They test the exception.
Yeah, they test the underlying assumption.
Exactly. The mathematical breaking points and the really precise definitions that make these economic models fall apart.
Which is exactly why we are here.
Yeah.
For this deep dive, we pulled together a massive stack of sources. We've got past DPR question papers, examiner reports, standard macro and econometrics textbooks, and our own compiled notes on where candidates historically bleed marks.
Because the mission today is pure exam strategy. No theoretical fluff, no long-winded derivation.
Right. We are hunting down the highest yield MCQ traps, figuring out the how and why behind them, and, locking in the exact logic you need to eliminate the wrong options.
Because in a timed, high-stakes environment, rote memorization will absolutely fail you. When the panic sets in, you need to rely on the mechanical intuition of why a model behaves the way it does.
Okay, let's unpack this. I'm going to need you to be the ultimate exam strategist today. And there's really no better place to start than the absolute minefield of macro growth models.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm looking at our notes, and the collision between the Harrod-Domar model and the Solow model seems to be where the most traps are laid. Specifically around this idea of confusing a level effect with a rate effect.
It is the single most lucrative trap for examiners. Let's look at Harrod-Domar first because, well, chronologically and logically, it sets the stage.
Right. So mechanically, Harrod-Domar gives us that simple formula. The growth rate, G, equals S over V. The savings rate divided by the capital output ratio.
Yeah.
And Harrod outlines 3 distinct growth rates. The warranted rate, which is what businesses plan for. The natural rate, dictated by population growth and technical progress, and the actual rate of growth happening on the ground.
And the MCQ trap here almost always targets stability, the famous knife-edge instability theorem. Examiners will ask what happens when the actual rate deviates from the warranted rate.
Right, and if we think about the underlying mechanism here, it's like driving a car with a broken accelerator.
Okay, I like that.
If your actual growth exceeds your warranted growth, meaning demand is higher than what businesses plan for, they don't just gently correct course. They realize they don't have enough machines, so they frantically order more capital.
Which creates more demand.
Exactly, which pushes actual growth even further away from the warranted rate. You get a cumulative expansion. It accelerates away from equilibrium. And the same happens in reverse for a recession. Any deviation amplifies.
Spot on. That lack of a stabilizing mechanism is crucial, but here is the major MCQ trap that catches even top students. The exam will give you a statement like, according to the model, an increase in the savings rate permanently raises the long-run growth rate.
And if you've spent too much time studying modern macro, your knee-jerk reaction is to say, false, savings only affects the level, not the rate.
Exactly. But in Harrod-Domar, that statement is true.
Really?
Yes, because the capital output ratio, V, is fixed. There is no diminishing returns to capital. So every single extra rupee saved goes straight into buying machines that produce at the exact same efficiency as the old machines.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, a higher savings rate permanently increases the long-run growth rate. You have to isolate Harrod-Domar logic from Solow logic.
Got it, which is the perfect bridge, because Solow looked at that rigid fixed capital output ratio and realized it just didn't reflect reality. I mean, Harrod essentially said, if you have 10 tractors and 1 farmer, 9 tractors sit completely idle. Solow introduces the neoclassical production function, saying, no, we can substitute capital for labor.
Solow brings in the critical concept of diminishing returns to capital, and that changes the math completely.
Let's visualize this for a second, because the why is so important for the listener. In Solow, imagine that same farm. The first tractor you buy massively increases the farmer's output. The second tractor helps a bit.
Sure.
By the 10th tractor, the farmer is just alternating which one he drives. The extra output drops to almost 0. But, and this is the kicker, depreciation is a fixed percentage of all your capital.
Right. Tractors still rust whether you use them or not.
Exactly. So eventually, the sheer cost of replacing broken tractors eats up every single penny of your savings. That's the steady state, right? Where investment exactly equals depreciation.
That is the exact mechanism. The formula is S times F of K equals delta K. Investment equals depreciation. And this leads to the ultimate Solow MCQ trap.
Let's hear it.
The option will read, in the Solow model, a higher savings rate raises the long-run growth rate. You must eliminate it immediately.
Because once you hit that steady state, where all your savings go to fixing old machines, capital per worker stops growing. Output per worker stops growing. Your growth rate per worker is 0.
Precisely. If a country suddenly doubles its savings rate, yes, they will accumulate more capital for a while and they will transition to a higher level of income. They get richer.
Right, a level effect.
Yes. But eventually, diminishing returns and depreciation catch up again at that new, higher plateau. The long-run rate of per worker growth goes right back to 0.
So what actually drives long-run growth in Solow?
Only 2 exogenous factors, population growth and total factor productivity, or TFP. And because they are exogenous, it means they are outside the model. Government policy cannot touch them.
Right.
Oh, and speaking of TFP, the exam will sometimes refer to it as a Solow residual. It's simply the portion of economic growth that cannot be mathematically explained by adding more capital and labor. It's the magic of technological progress.
Okay, before we move on, there are 2 other Solow concepts that always pop up: the golden rule and convergence. The golden rule is just the specific savings rate that maximizes steady-state consumption, which mathematically occurs where the marginal product of capital equals the depreciation rate.
Right.
But let's talk about convergence, because there's a linguistic trick examiners use here.
Yes, the difference between absolute and conditional convergence. The trap is an option claiming Solow predicts poor countries will inevitably catch up to rich ones. That's absolute convergence, and it's false. Solow predicts conditional convergence.
Meaning, a poor country only grows faster toward the steady state if it has the exact same structural parameters, like, the same savings rate, same depreciation, same population growth as the rich country.
Exactly.
If their fundamental economies look different, they're heading toward entirely different steady states and they will never converge.
Exactly. But let's take a step back. Solow's conclusion that government policy, like boosting savings, has 0 effect on long-run growth rates, it deeply frustrated policymakers.
Oh, absolutely. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you're an economist advising a government, you don't want to say, sorry, long-run growth is exogenous, there's nothing we can do.
No, nobody wants to hear that.
This frustration directly birthed endogenous growth theory, specifically the AK model. Y equals A times K.
It's a deceptively simple equation that solves the Solow problem by completely redefining what capital is.
Right. Because Solow assumed capital was just physical stuff, tractors, factories, things that rust and suffer from diminishing returns. Endogenous growth theorists, like Paul Romer with product variety or Robert Lucas with human capital, they asked, what if capital includes knowledge, ideas, software?
Because ideas behave entirely differently than physical objects. They are non-rivalrous.
That's the crucial mechanism.
Right, so explain how that breaks diminishing returns.
Think about it like this. If I build a physical factory, it gets crowded. Adding a 1,000th worker yields less output than the first. But if I write a piece of software code, like a blueprint or an algorithm, that code can be used by 1 person or 1 billion people simultaneously without ever degrading.
It doesn't rust.
Exactly. Because knowledge can be shared infinitely without diminishing. Capital, with a capital K in the AK model, does not suffer from diminishing returns.
What's fascinating here is how this flips the MCQ logic completely on its head. If an exam question asks about convergence in the AK model, the answer is that it doesn't exist.
Wow.
Because there are no diminishing returns to slow down a rich, highly capitalized country, a nation with a higher savings rate won't just hit a higher level and stop. It will permanently grow at a faster rate forever. The rich permanently diverge from the poor.
So from a policy perspective, endogenous growth justifies government intervention, subsidizing R&D, funding education, building tech infrastructure. These policies actually affect long-run growth rates.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you see an MCQ asking which model supports government policy permanently altering the growth rate, you are looking for endogenous growth.
Exactly. Now, we've spent a lot of time on how economies accumulate capital and grow their GDP, but the RBI examiners know that growth does not equal development.
Right.
Which forces us to pivot to how we measure human welfare.
Let's talk about Amartya Sen and Arthur Lewis. Let's start with Sen's capability approach. He argued that just looking at utilitarian income is fundamentally flawed. We should be looking at freedoms.
Right.
What can a person actually do and be? their functionings and capabilities. Having money doesn't matter if you don't have the freedom or health to use it. And this theoretical framework is what operationalized into the Human Development Index, the HDI.
And here is where candidates relying on older textbooks or out-of-date past papers get completely slaughtered.
Listen closely to this one, guys, because it's a pure, testable fact.
The HDI is composed of 3 dimensions: life expectancy, schooling, and GNI per capita. But how they are aggregated changed in the 2010 revision. The HDI now uses a geometric mean of those 3 indices. It does not use an arithmetic mean. If you see an option suggesting it's a simple average, eliminate it immediately.
And the why behind this is really elegant mathematics. An arithmetic mean allows for perfect substitutability. If a country has massive oil-rich wealth, but an abysmal life expectancy, a simple average hides the terrible health outcomes.
Right.
But a geometric mean, which is multiplying them and taking the cube root, penalizes variance. Think of it like calculating the volume of a box. If one side is 0, the entire volume is 0.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The geometric mean heavily penalizes uneven development, which aligns perfectly with Sen's philosophy that you can't just buy your way out of poor health or bad education.
That's a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Next up in development theories is the Lewis dual sector model, the structural transformation from a traditional subsistence agricultural sector to a modern capitalist industrial sector.
The core assumption here is that agriculture has an unlimited supply of surplus labor. The marginal productivity of an extra worker on the farm is basically 0.
Right.
So the modern sector can pull workers away from the farms without driving up the agricultural wage. But here's where I get tangled up. Does that mean the capitalist factory owner just pays the workers that exact same rock-bottom subsistence wage?
That is exactly the MCQ trap. The instinctive answer is yes, but the correct answer is no. The wage in the modern sector is fixed at a premium above the subsistence wage, usually around 30% higher.
Oh, because of the friction of moving.
Exactly.
If I'm living in a village, moving to a city like Mumbai or Delhi means higher rent, transportation costs, and the psychological cost of leaving my community. A factory owner has to offer a premium to incentivize me to migrate.
Exactly. The modern wage is fixed at that premium until the entire surplus labor from agriculture is absorbed, which is called the Lewis turning point. So if the MCQ says the capitalist wage equals the subsistence wage, it's false. It equals subsistence plus a premium.
Okay, we've covered the theory of growth and development, but how does a central bank like the RBI actually measure these things? They use statistics. And this brings us to econometrics, which is notoriously tricky because the language is unforgiving.
Let's focus on ordinary least squares, OLS. For OLS to be the best linear unbiased estimator, BLUE, it must satisfy the Gauss-Markov conditions.
Right. Zero mean error, homoscedasticity, no autocorrelation, no perfect multicollinearity, and errors that are uncorrelated with the regressors. But I know reciting those doesn't help in the exam. It's about knowing what happens when they break.
And that leads to the most vicious econometrics trap on the entire DEPR exam, the bias versus efficiency trap.
Oh, this is a big one.
The exam will give you a scenario. Let's say you have multicollinearity, which is high correlation among your regressors, usually detected via the variance inflation factor, or VIF.
Right.
Or you have heterozygosticity, where your error variance isn't constant. The statement will read, multicollinearity makes OLS estimators biased.
And you must recognize that as completely false. Multicollinearity and heterozygosticity do not make OLS biased. They break the efficiency condition.
Let's explain why, intuitively.
Okay, think of it like a set of weighing scales. Bias means your scale is fundamentally broken. It always reads 5 kilograms too heavy. No matter how many times you weigh something, your average is wrong.
Right.
Efficiency is about the environment you're weighing in. Imagine you have a perfectly calibrated, unbiased scale, but you've placed it on a rickety table on a moving train. The needle is shaking wildly. Any single measurement might be off, but if you take 1,000 measurements, the average will still be perfectly accurate.
That is the perfect analogy. Multicollinearity inflates your standard errors. Because 2 variables are moving together so closely, the model gets confused and can't isolate which one is doing the heavy lifting.
It throws its hands up and says, I'm not sure.
Exactly. So your standard errors explode, your t-statistics plummet, and your coefficients become imprecise. But the estimate itself is still centered on the true population parameter. It is unbiased.
Same with heterozygosticity. The coefficients remain unbiased, but your standard errors are wrong, which is why you'd use White's robust standard errors to fix it. Bottom line, if an MCQ says multicollinearity or heterozygosticity causes bias, eliminate it. They cause inefficiency.
Now, let's look at hypothesis testing traps, specifically type I versus type 2 errors.
Let's ditch the old textbook examples and use something real, like a spam email filter.
Okay, I like that.
A type I error is a false positive. You reject a null hypothesis that is actually true. In the email world, your null hypothesis is, this email is normal. A type I error means your filter aggressively flags a perfectly normal email from your boss as spam. You've claimed there's an effect when there isn't one. This is controlled by your alpha level, typically set at 5%.
Right. And a type 2 error.
A type 2 error is a false negative. You fail to reject a false null. Your filter looks at an obvious phishing scam and says, looks fine to me, letting it into your inbox. You missed the real effect. This is controlled by the power of the test.
And the exam will test your understanding of the trade-off. If you make your spam filter ridiculously strict to completely avoid type I errors, say dropping your alpha to 0.1%, you inevitably increase the chance of a type 2 error.
Yeah, you'll start letting actual spam through because your threshold for proof is too high.
Excellent. Now let's apply these statistics to something the RBI cares deeply about: tracking inflation. This brings us to index numbers.
Oh, yeah.
The classic MCQ here is always about directionality. Which index overstates inflation and which understates it? We are talking about Laspeyres versus Paasche.
Let's reason this out rather than just memorizing it. The Laspeyres price index uses base period quantities as weights. So the basket of goods is frozen in the past.
Right. So imagine the price of apples quadruples over a year. What does a rational consumer do? They experience the substitution effect. They stop buying apples and start buying cheaper oranges. But the Laspeyres index is blind to that. It assumes consumers stubbornly keep buying the exact same number of expensive apples they bought last year. Because it ignores substitution, Laspeyres artificially inflates the cost of living. It overstates inflation.
It makes total sense. And Paasche is the exact opposite. Paasche uses current period quantities as weights. It looks at the basket of goods people are buying right now after they've already substituted away from the expensive apples.
Exactly.
Because it uses post-substitution behavior, it effectively hides the pain of those initial price shocks. Therefore, Paasche understates inflation.
Laspeyres overstates. Paasche understates. Reverse them and you fail the question. And as a quick addition to satisfy the mathematical properties, the Fisher ideal index is the geometric mean of Laspeyres and Paasche. It balances the upward and downward biases and satisfies the time reversal test.
It's also vital to connect this to India-specific data. Both the wholesale price index, the WPI, and the structure of the consumer price index, CPI, in India rely heavily on Laspeyres-type methodologies. They use fixed base year baskets, which means our official inflation metrics naturally have an embedded upward bias. That's a highly testable, real-world application.
So what does this all mean for the candidates sitting in the exam hall?
It means we need to pressure test what we just covered. Let's do a rapid-fire application. I'm going to throw 6 common trap setups from past papers at you, and instead of just repeating the concept, let's identify the exact elimination logic. Ready?
Let's do it.
Scenario 1. An MCQ asks what accounts for the Solow residual.
You look for the option that mentions total factor productivity or unexplained technological progress. You eliminate anything attributing it to capital accumulation.
Scenario 2. The question provides data on life expectancy, schooling, and income, and asks you to calculate the HDI.
You immediately apply a geometric mean calculation. If one of the options is a simple arithmetic average of the 3, you cross it out. It's been geometric since 2010.
Scenario 3. A statement claims that in the Lewis model, workers in the modern sector are paid the agricultural subsistence wage.
You mark it false. The modern wage must include a premium to cover the friction of migration, and it stays at that premium until the labor surplus is absorbed.
Scenario 4. A medical test tells a healthy patient they have a disease.
That is a false positive. They rejected the true reality of health. That's a type I error.
Scenario 5. A question claims the Paasche index overestimates the cost of living.
False. Paasche uses current weights, accounts for substitution, and therefore understates inflation. Laspeyres is the one that overstates.
Final scenario. A policy question asks which model allows government education spending to permanently increase the long-run economic growth rate.
You eliminate Solow immediately because that's a level effect. You look for the AK model or endogenous growth theory because by defining capital broadly to include non-rivalrous human capital, it removes diminishing returns.
Brilliant. That is exactly the kind of active filtering you need to do when staring down 4 very similar-looking options.
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Think about the collision between these theoretical models and real-world central banking at an institution like the RBI.
I love where this is going.
If endogenous growth theory proves that human capital and non-rivalrous ideas prevent diminishing returns, and Sen's capability approach proves that health, education, and human freedoms are the true markers of a nation's capacity, how should a central bank practically measure the output gap?
Wow, yeah.
Traditional inflation targeting models rely heavily on physical capital, factory capacity utilization, and industrial output metrics. But are those purely physical models actually equipped to measure the true productive ceiling of a 21st century knowledge economy?
That's a phenomenal question. If human capital doesn't face diminishing returns, maybe our potential output, like the speed limit of our economy before inflation kicks in, is actually much higher than a traditional Solow-based physical model suggests.
Exactly. It really makes you wonder if the econometric tools we use to set the repo rate are fully capturing the reality of endogenous growth.
That is exactly the kind of high-level synthesis that takes you from just scraping by in Phase 1 to absolutely dominating the descriptive answers in Phase 2. But for now, focus on the immediate hurdle. Keep your head clear, remember the elimination logic we unpacked today, especially distinguishing between bias and efficiency and separating rate effects from level effects. We wish you the absolute best of luck on the DPR Phase 1 exam. Go crack those MCQs, trust your logic, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.